Hi everybody, my name is Ott and I'm one of the co-founders of Speakly. And you're listening to the very first episode of the Speakly podcast. Now, the purpose of this podcast is to be pure inspiration for you to help you succeed in language learning. For that, we're going to give you great advice, tips and tricks of what to do differently to learn a new language or two. Today, we're going to have a conversation with Colm, who is an awesome, inspiring person from Tallinn, Estonia. He's a linguist, a polyglot, a language learning expert, and we are going to talk about Irish, the state of smaller languages, multilingual children, and loads more. We are all set to go, but before we do, Frankie Animal. So how did you end up in Estonia? That's a question that many Estonian people would have that, you know, Colm, you come from the country of now
Saints and scholars. Yeah.
I'm getting into stereotypes from the first minute now, elves and rainbows and whatnot, right?
So leprechauns and rainbows and Lucky Charm.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, this is a question I used to get quite a bit. I now work in an international company, so I don't get it at all anymore. But yeah, definitely when I was amongst Estonians for most of my day, they would ask, well, let's put it this way. Many people don't speak English very well. So the way that they ask this question comes across as quite rude. It kind of boils down to the whole, what are you doing here and why are you still here? So it does come across correctly, but I know what they mean. But
when you first arrived to Estonia, did you think that they were genuinely asking, why are you still here?
No, I understood. I mean, I used to be a teacher, right? So I mean, I'm familiar with questions phrased in an unusual manner. But so I didn't read anything malicious into it at all. But why am I here? I suppose I came here because of a certain someone who I met in line, and I think I was only supposed to be here for about a year. That's what at least I told myself. And
that's how the story goes usually, right?
Yeah. Well, I did stay here for a year, and I went back home to do a master's. But I proceeded then to come back, and I've been here ever since. And I think it's been about 8 or 9 years or so. So I mean, about 9 years in total I've been here.
And obviously, you have the story that you went into the old town of Tallinn.
Yeah.
You were amazed, bedazzled by the medieval charm, and you decided at that precise moment that that's it. That's my piece of land on this planet, right?
Well,
not particularly.
Let's of course not tell a lie. I mean, I do love the old town of Tallinn. It's pretty magical, right? But I think that kind of came maybe a couple of years afterwards, once I was working in a school in the center of the old town. I think maybe coming home or walking to work one morning, I think, and there was the church bells, and I think maybe the Estonian national anthem was played pretty much every morning when they raised the flag, right? So I mean, that was quite nice, and I mean, and particularly in the winter time when they have the snow on the cobblestones, and sometimes you can hear, at Christmas time you can hear Christmas songs in the church. I think it's quite magical, and I think, and then at those times I was pretty glad and and grateful to have the opportunity to actually work in the old town. But I kind of came a couple of years into living here. But I think originally it was just because of my now wife, why I came here. But of course, I mean, I stayed. So there's obviously things that I like about Estonia for sure. I mean, of course, there's the old town, but I mean, if you move outside the city, you have the you wouldn't say like you've got the mountains, right? Because there's no mountains, right? And there's barely any hills.
We are really proud of the Estonian highest mountain, which is 300 meters high.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But no, I mean, there's the glorious bogs, and there's the forest, and there's the beaches, and there's the islands. So there's definitely a lot of things here for people who like to be outdoors. I mean, it's definitely a great place to live. It's safe for kids. So I think, I mean, there's a lot to Estonia. Probably the salaries aren't so amazing here, but the cost of living is also a little bit lower. I mean, in terms of, say, maybe accommodation and stuff, but I mean, that is changing in the recent years. I mean, rents are getting more expensive, but yeah, so I'm here, I came here first 2006. I'm still here. So, I mean, there's something good about the country.
Yeah, there has to be something, right? So the whole point of doing this podcast as well, the main point is to be an inspiration to people who are learning some languages at the moment and who are looking for interesting maybe ideas, tricks, tips that would help them. And you yourself, and many of them are parents as well, right? So you yourself, you are raising a multilingual child at home, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I have two children. I have a son of 4 and a daughter of 2.
So how are you doing this? Like, how are you approaching the multilingual thing? So, as I understand, you are mixing not only English and Estonian, but also Irish, right?
Yeah. So, and when I use the word Irish, I suppose I'm kind of, Americans would know it as Gaelic. But yeah, I mean, Irish or Irish Gaelic or Gaelic. It's quite a different language from English. So, I mean, we have the 3 languages at home. Originally, the plan was that I would speak only in Irish to my son. He was the first to be born.
How did that work out? Like, how long did that, like, really?
It lasted quite actually very long time. I think it probably lasted until maybe 2.5 years. I mean, until he started actually maybe speaking back. So about 2.5 years, maybe a little bit after his sister was born. And the original plan, of course, for my wife was to only speak Estonian, right? And that lasted like probably around the same time. I mean, about 2 years. So I mean, for about 2 years, he had kind of constant input in Irish from me, and Estonian from my wife. But I would say, I mean, I think everyone starts off with the best intentions. Like you're never going to know how exactly things are going to change in your life, or how the child's going to react, or what the environment's going to be. And I think in our case, I did a lot of work, both outside the home and inside the home. I mean, I was juggling a couple of jobs, a couple of projects. I unfortunately didn't get a lot of time with my son when he was quite young. So I mean, his exposure to Irish was quite minimal. I mean, it was like I was using only Irish with him. But I mean, the actual total time of me actually during the day talking to him at all was quite low. And looking back, I think the quality of the input in Irish was probably not so amazing. Such that, I mean, I think it was a lot of kind of orders, a lot of commands, a lot of basic languages, but not a lot of he didn't overhear a lot of complex language or a lot of diversity in language. And I think this is where where English comes in, I think, because me and my wife speak English together. So my son would have from the very early days overheard me and my wife together speaking English. And of course, she speaks fluently. And the consequence of that, of course, is the language is quite complicated. You got a nice variety of topics and structures and inputs, things like that. So while we weren't actually directly talking to him in English, was probably
he was picking it up just by this by
yeah. I mean, he overheard it. I mean, and then you add to that like English TV, the cartoons. I mean, we don't have a TV, but I mean, there's YouTube, for example. There's movies. My family speaks English, so when we went home to visit them or when they came to visit us, I mean, he would hear a lot of English being spoken. So I think now the kind of consequence of that is like his English became more strong, and his first language became English. And then the knock-on consequence of this, and there's a lot of social linguistic things that you could research being done on these things, and I do a little bit of research myself from in the area. The consequence, I think, of having a child kind of their first language being a certain, like say language X, in our case it was English, basically encourages either consciously or subconsciously the parents and the people around the child to feed back English into them. And then the more exposure they get, the better it is.
Yeah.
You just have to be kind of like sensible in what your goals are and your expectations and be realistic, I think.
Yeah, sure.
I think you shouldn't put like maybe too much pressure on the children. I do research in this area, and obviously I don't want to go on too much about that. But I mean, I think like there's certain ingredients that are really important. I mean, I think a nice harmonious environment for the children, lots of input, varied input, a need for the children to speak those languages and to use them, right? So I mean, if they don't have a need, if they don't get exposure, they're not going to develop them. So I mean,
it's the same as a person standing in the gym watching, the gym equipment and thinking that like I want muscles, right? It's like it doesn't work. It doesn't work like that, right?
Exactly, like someone looking at a bicycle or people talking about a bicycle, not being and trying to think that you can ride a bicycle. I mean, it's with any activity. You use those muscles, and for sure, I mean, it's definitely been an eye opener for I mean, I've read a lot of literature in the area. We start off with amazing intentions, but yeah, where we're going to be, kind of my goal, at least personally for myself, is to basically increase their Irish this year. Definitely make more of an effort to be home with them, to expose myself. Expose Irish to children, to expose them more to the Irish, and I think we'll see the benefit of that maybe next year and see how I'll see myself how things go. But definitely it's a great adventure. I'd recommend it to anyone. I mean, I think you just have to be kind of, as I said, you have to be realistic about the goals, about your intentions. There's two partners. There's two people in a partnership, in a couple. And you kind of need to talk about these things and be on board. I mean, and be on the same page about what your intentions and your goals are for your, with anything in parenting, what you want for your children, be it, education-wise or health-wise, diet-wise, activity-wise, hobby-wise. Language is just a part of that. So being on the same page with your partner about what you want for the children, and then research how you can do that. I mean.
But what is the state like? What is the state of Irish at the moment? Like, it's so funny when I talk to people here in Estonia when I'm visiting. It's so funny that people have the notion that Estonian as a language is under threat of some sort. Like, it's so funny for me because almost like a million people are speaking Estonian, and when somebody tells me that Estonian is in danger or in some way, that then I always remember my friend Gilbert, who is a French teacher in Estonia as well. He's originally from Congo, and he once told me a story that he's from a really really small village somewhere in Congo, and his native tongue is only spoken by 1,000 people, I think, not more. Mm-hmm. And what they are doing is that he's living in Estonia, mm-hmm. and every night he's calling to his relatives to practice, to basically speak the language to keep it alive, right? Yes. And when you compare it to Estonian or other languages that are spoken by so many people, we have universities, right? Like all these things. then it's kind of stupid to say that, yeah, it's in danger. But on the other hand, maybe in some ways it is. Like, what is the state of Gaelic or Irish tone?
Well, I mean, just before I get to Irish, I suppose, like, in the case of Estonian, I think it's probably the second smallest language to fulfill all the functions of a nation state. So if you consider Icelandic maybe being the smallest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you know, I've done research on what attitudes of secondary school students to Estonian. I mean, and I think it was pretty much 50-50. 50 would say like that they don't really care.
Really?
About. Now, I mean, you have to take that with a grain of salt. There are teenagers, so I mean, they're quite internationally focused. At least the ones I interacted with and researched. There was a kind of a questionnaire that kind of dealt with about 300 students. And then there were 50% who said like they really like the language and they love using it and they want to see it continue. And yeah, I mean, there were quite a few that were worried about the language, and then there were a couple then that said they love the language, but it's definitely healthy. And so yeah, I mean, you will see those attitudes, but look, I mean, you see those attitudes by French people as well. I mean, they see certain English words being used in French. And I mean, I've sort of like I kind of follow France a little bit by studying the language and the country at university level. So I don't know too much about the German situation, but I mean, from my basic sort of non-professional viewpoint, it seems that the French people are sort of like more sort of like on edge and anxious about the French language than say Germans are about the German language. So yeah. I mean, you will often see English words used without a problem in German, and no one seems to bat an eyelid. Whereas when the same thing used in French, people seem to get a bit of upset about it, right? Yeah. So and they're afraid that the English language is going to crush French. I mean, French is one of the biggest languages in the world, right? So turning to Irish, I mean, what the situation is, I mean, it's a very interesting language sociolinguistically. I mean, it's the first language of the state in the sense that it's the first official language. That's officially, it's in the constitution as the national language and first language. In real terms, right? I mean, the vast majority of people are native English speakers in Ireland. The vast majority of communication takes place in English. Media, daily life, education, business, marriages, families, relationships. I mean, it's all in English. Now, I will say, I mean, the English we speak in Ireland is it can be quite different than, say, America or the UK, parts of the UK. So I mean, for me, while you could say like English speakers, I mean, you could say English is my native language. It's true, but then what is English? So I mean, for me, I mean, I would say that like sort of like Irish English would be my native language, meaning in the sense the English spoken in Ireland. So when I communicate with Irish people in English, it feels very different from say when I communicate in English with someone from Australia or Canada or the US. I mean, the English is very different. Sometimes there's actually misunderstandings. The words we use, the phrases, the whole culture of the language is very different, right? Yeah. So, and also in Irish, for example, in Ireland, when we speak English, we use some Irish words, right? So I mean, it's very sort of common.
You're probably swearing in Irish, right?
No. I mean, I'm not saying vulgarity and swearing. I mean, I'm more so like, sort of like this. There's this sort of like richness to the language. I mean, sort of like, and particularly like older people, but even younger people as well. They will say, like, for example, if they want to say that they have a love for something and they really love to do something, well, they'll say like they have a gra for something. So gra is the Irish word for love, and it's not used in a sort of like an ironic way or a sort of like it's not marked language. I mean, it's just completely normal. We use like so much words and even like the structures of the language and the phraseology of English in Ireland is quite different. I remember an American lecturer used to tell us a story about his first time in Ireland. He arrived at this this B&B, and he had just traveled like very far, and he was really hungry, and the woman of the establishment, I guess what we call the Banon tea in Irish, the house lady, said to him, "Are you after your dinner?" And he said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she said, "Fine, so." And for about an hour or so, he was waiting for food, and it never came. And so what the actual woman was asking was like, "Have you had your dinner?" But in Irish, we translated literally into English, it means like, "Are you after something?" Like so at this point in time now, are you after a point in time in the past where you had your dinner?
These are the wonderful nuances, right?
Yeah.
It's just great to experience those little things. Like I've been experiencing these things in south of Spain, for example, how the language is a little different, and north of Spain and south of France, and those kinds of things. It's just such a good flavor to life, right?
Yeah.
So Irish is not in danger, I understand, right?
Not at all. I mean, I think according to the census, we have about 1.7 million people who state that they can speak some Irish. I think probably about, I would say, like, if you were to give like an estimate, about like 300,000 people who have a very good command of the language. And according to the census, about 75 or 80%, 80,000 people speak the language on a daily basis. So if you take into account, not like ignore the whole 1.7 million, which is a lovely statistic, but just take those 80,000 people who use the language on a daily basis, compare that to the 7,000 languages in the world, it's very healthy. So, and then you factor in like state support, it's compulsory in the education system, there's a TV channel, there's multiple radio stations, there's online newspapers, there's magazines, there's journals, like there's so much.
So you speak loads of languages yourself, right? So what would you recommend? What are you doing yourself? Like, what would you recommend to people listening to this podcast? Well, what should they do? Like, get their stuff and go to France,
well,
or?
I mean, like, but I would say, yeah. I mean, I've studied a lot of languages. I've tried to learn a lot of languages. I do speak, bits or kind of a good amount of 4 different languages. I've learned so much about like learning languages, what works and what doesn't work, and I've had a lot of successes and a lot of failures. What doesn't work that I found, and like you have to kind of realize, I suppose, that I'm coming to language from a very sort of like from the perspective of a linguist. So I mean, I love grammar, right? But I've come to realize, and it's no surprise, that studying books about, like, say, Romanian grammar is not going to make you learn Romanian, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have so many facts about, like, different things about the aspects of the language, but you're not going to be able to learn the language. So I think it's with anything, right? Being realistic in your goals. I also think sort of like coming to those. You set yourself these certain goals. I mean, do you want to learn to read in a language? Do you want to learn to speak in a language? Do you want to like go into a bakery shop in France, and do you want to be able to buy a baguette or whatever you want to buy, right? So you practice for the situations you want to use the language. I mean, it seems so basic and so sort of like obvious that you shouldn't actually have to say it, right?
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? It's something like, it's language. It's something so natural to us,
yeah,
that actually, like, the question itself is unreasonable, because it is something that we have already done unconsciously. And now everybody's coming up with methods, more specific methods how to do it. Like, we are doing it all the time, right? So it's basically taking away roadblocks, not putting, new ones, right?
Yeah, I mean, and like, so like I had such a really bad experience learning languages at school, because what you're in these classrooms, there's maybe 29 other people there. There's 30 students in a class. Half of them don't even want to be there, right? You only have 40 minutes a lesson, so by the time people stop messing, they sit down. You have about 30 minutes in total. You're going through like homeworks. You're reading, you're writing. You oftentimes don't even hear the teacher speak, because they often like teach the language through the native language of the students, so they're not even using the language in class. And you might actually only hear the language on an audio cassette tape practicing for the oral exam or the oral exam, and then you might only speak the language one time or two times like prior to the oral exam. So it's completely not so much nonsense, right?
Yeah.
So
That's such a funny thing. You just said, but the reality is that the majority of language classes work exactly like that. That like 80% of it is the native tongue, right?
Mhm.
And for me, it was really I was 21 or 22 when I came to teach French in the old town in the same school where you were teaching. And the first rule that I was given was that you can only use the language that you're teaching. And for me it was mind blowing in a way. It was like 11 years ago, right? And for me it was mind blowing. Like, how can I do this? How am I going to explain things to people? Right, right. So that's the first that's the first reaction. Like, explain, like, how is it possible to now I can't explain those tables to people, right?
Yeah, I mean the thing is as well. I mean, coming back to that example of like going to a bakery shop or buying a ticket for a rail ticket at the train station, right? I mean, if you're not practicing that language and actually practicing for those situations, I mean, going through French poetry or like learning like multiple conjugations of a certain verb, and then they go on like these, they go on these interrail tickets through Europe, and they arrive at the Gare du Nord, and they can't even like buy a ticket because they've been reading Moliere and like they're not even able to like it's ridiculous, right? So yeah, I mean,
but it's happening, in Tallinn there is a school where they're specialized in reading Moliere,
I know the school, but and another thing about language school that kind of sucks with language classes in the school is that the other people in the class, you have to listen to 29 other people also learning, speaking, and your speaking partners always tend to be the person sitting beside you, who has like maybe even less language than you. How are you even meant to learn? Because you've got no like some nice inputs. There's very little rich inputs for you to grasp onto.
Yeah.
Now I think we're blessed today with the technology today. I mean when I was at school, I mean the smartphone was basically the Nokia had the snake, right?
The unbreakable Nokia 3310, right?
And then it had Snake 2, which is even better, right? But nowadays, I mean, with smartphones, you can put a library of inputs in like multiple languages. If you want to learn Farsi, look, you have it on your iPad, you have it on your iPhone or whatever device you're using. You can put it in your pocket, so you can do it when you're out running,
Yeah, exactly.
So it's so amazing that the things that we have at our fingertips, and it's sad that most people, when they think about language learning, they think like, oh, I must have a class, I must have a teacher, I must have a textbook, I must sit there for 2 hours twice a week, and it's such a waste of time.
Yeah.
And these sort of stuff.
No, you have to start with the sentence, "The cat is under the table." Always, that's that's the most useful one that people come up with.
But
right?
you've seen, right, the recording of Eddie Izzard, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's amazing, I love that sketch so much. He's an amazing comedian, and he's a great proponent of language learning and language use. But
by the way, usually we wrap this conversation up with some recommendations, and the recommendations are usually about something really inspiring. It doesn't have to be language related. You're obviously a language learning expert and language expert in general, but something. Just something really inspiring that you have read, listened to, watched. Recommend something to the listeners. Something that has helped you be a better person.
Something that has helped me be a better person.
Yes, 2018. New Year's resolutions, all that stuff, right?
To be honest, I think being patient with people. I think kids have been an amazing sort of learning for me. I mean, I learned so much from my kids. I know it's cliche that people talk about like, oh, I learned so much from my kids and they've changed me as a person. But it's really true. And I think that sort of like, I think if you can't have children, if kids are not something you're going to have in a couple of years' time or whatever reason, I think being out of your comfort zone is an amazing thing. So I think what happens is that I work in this company where we're constantly pushed to be out of our comfort zone. So basically the idea is that, like, if we stay in our comfort zone, nothing's going to grow. Okay, it's going to stagnate. It's going to get stale. But if you basically step over that threshold, that boundary, into that place where you actually feel anxious, that you feel that you're like, that I'm maybe not quite good enough to do this job or this role or to be in this position or to give this talk or whatever. I think putting yourself there and basically learn as much as you can, interact with as many people as you can, be afraid, right? Be anxious, be afraid. But don't let that stop you basically doing things that you think that you might be interested in. And who knows, maybe you'll actually love something that you never even considered. So, like, be open to basically being exposed to many different things, to traveling, to talking to people. And I know these are all sort of like very, very cliche things. So I think yeah, and I think
but they are true, right? They work.
Yeah, they're true. I mean, coming from a linguist, I think probably the one thing I would say is that we need to get over our attitudes, our negative attitudes about the way that people speak. So there's a common things that, like, some people are less educated, or their speech is less intelligent or less educated, or they use different grammar, so they use the wrong grammar. Maybe in 2018, maybe like trying to get over those things.
To be more flexible with expectations.
That there's no wrong dialect, there's no wrong version, there's no wrong grammar. Everyone basically speaks the way that they speak, and everyone's grammatical in their native language, and everyone's accent is beautiful, and everyone's dialect is beautiful, and yeah, just because it's not in the book, and just because it's not maybe on the radio, and just not because it's not like written down and very official, it's basically like this diversity of voices is an amazing thing to be immersed in, to expose yourself to. I think that's what I would say from a linguist perspective. That's what you should take away from the conversation.
That's awesome. That's a great way how to wrap this up. So thanks, Colm, and thanks for listening, everybody.
You're close to ring mine today.